Hey everyone, it's Types, and today we're taking a look at Surging Sparks, the entire set. I am looking at the Justin Basil website as well, and this has said the entire set. We're taking a look at all the cards that are worth talking about. This will be a faster paced video, and I will just be skipping some cards. I'll be talking about the ones I want to talk about. This Execute, has some value, but whatever, we're not really talking about it. However, the first card we are going to be talking about is Durant EX. I'm really excited for this card. It's not very good, but on play, you discard the top card of your opponent's deck. There is the Stadium Air 0 Underdepths. I did mention a combo with Lunatone. I think it was with Lunatone, but that combo unfortunately doesn't work. I got confused about rulings and just some things in that video, so I was wrong about that. But Durant EX is a pretty interesting card. Can be played in Snorlax. By the way, there are some tournament results in Japan for pretty much all these cards if they've seen play. So Durant EX has seen some play in something like Snorlax. It's a useful card where you can just mill a few cards through the use of Penny or whatever. So it's not a terrible card, but not a super strong card either. We have the Vivillon. Vivillon also is a pretty interesting Pokemon because of the evolution line it comes from, where it can just essentially evolve instantly. This is useful because its attack here is Evo Powder, the same thing as TM Evolution, except it's any number of Pokemon. Ultimately, TM Evolution is probably better almost all the time because you don't need a stage 2. You cannot rare Candy into Vivillon turn 1 either or the turn you put the Scatterbug into play because they're already on rare Candy. And so, anyway, the Vivillon is a card that is still definitely a somewhat interesting card. I guess it will be. Wait, when did the TM come out? Yeah, so it'll be rotating after TM Evolution, but actually, no, that doesn't really matter because the Scatterbugs and Speepos will also be rotating when TM Evolution comes out. Ultimately, probably not a very good card, but maybe in some weird deck with some weird combos, it could be good. We have Shiinotic here, which says you can put your opponent's active to sleep if you're in the active. Ultimately, this Pokemon's true retreat cost is pretty bad. There isn't really a way to give this free retreat as far as I'm aware. There are some ways to switch. Well, there are some stage 2s, but ultimately that's pretty awkward having to use a stage 2 and a stage 1 for just a support engine. That's probably not what you're looking to do here. The Shiinotic is probably not very good. There was a Mareep like this, which was a basic that just put them to sleep, which saw play in standard. It was quite a while ago by now, but still saw play. But ultimately, this is being an evolution with a 2 retreat cost is gonna stop it from seeing play. If it had free retreat, I do believe this card would see play, but it doesn't, so it probably won't. We do have the Rabsca and Wo-Chien, which say that they have pretty bad attacks, but if you have 3 or fewer cards in deck, they do something else, which it turns into a really good attack. Wo-Chien here, 20, but if you have the only 3 or fewer cards in deck, does 120 to 2 your opponent's bench Pokemon. And we have Rabsca, which does 240 if you have 3 or fewer cards in deck. 240 for 1 on a stage 1 is good. It's in fact very good, but it's not super game breaking. Ultimately, that's pretty bad, I imagine. And then Wo-Chien here is a bit more interesting, allowing you to do a mini Kyurem attack with Hazardous Greed, not applying any damage to much damage to the active, and only hitting 2 targets for substantial damage, but ultimately, this is an interesting card that you could kind of play. I think it did see some play. I don't remember what it was in. Oh, my stuff isn't loading. Well, there it is. Yeah, so what region will load upon apparently with energy switches in the deck, and then we also see someone played it in the Ceruledge EX Origin Form Palkia V-Star deck. Anyways, so ultimately Wo-Chien's probably not a super good card, but it is an interesting one to consider. And if you're able to run through your deck quickly, plus get the energy on, which getting the energy on isn't that hard, but it's not free either. If it was 1 energy, I think this card could be pretty playable. Then we do have this Paldean Taurus, ultimately probably not very good, but it can do 180 to a stage 1. Stage 1s are not very good right now and aren't going to be that much better with this set, but ultimately that's a good chunk of damage to do. Then we also can do 200 if you have a Terra on your bench. This is actually a solid attack, though nothing insane. We do have Victini increasing evolution fire Pokemon's damage output. It's only by 10, but it is a playable card with a new Ceruledge EX, which I'll cover, and maybe something else, but I don't know what that would be. Then we do have ourselves Let's see. Sense Scorch is like kind of interesting, but it's not that good. 130 for 1 is kind of okay, and you can damage your own bench Pokemon. We do have Skeledirge, which has the same attack as Origin Form Palkia V-Star, 60, 20 more for each bench Pokemon in play. However, it doesn't power itself up. Ultimately, this card doesn't seem super good. It is immune to effects of attacks, which is kind of cool, but ultimately, again, not that meaningful. Much more meaningful if it was on something like the basic, though it's not that bad. It does have, I'm sure, wait, is there one with 70? How do I spell this? There, oh, that's not English. No, there's not one with 70. So that is a bit awkward. Ultimately, I don't think a Skeletor's is particularly good, but it does have solid damage output. It's not a terrible card. We do have Armarouge and Ceruledge, which the Ceruledge is like a bit of a counter to Lugia, which is like kind of cool. Ultimately, these cards aren't super interesting, but specifically this Ceruledge is like kind of whatever. But then this Armarouge can do a 180 snipe, could be paired with the other Armarouge that moves energy, and the Armarouge EX as well as the Ceruledge EX. It is a stellar Pokemon, has a stellar attack, but the stellar attack it's not very good, right? It's not completely terrible, but ultimately very much outclassed by the first attack, which is definitely what you're building around, which is 20 more for each energy card in your discard pile. You want to get a bunch of energy in your discard pile, maybe 10 or so, and be one-shotting basic 2-prize Pokemon. Ceruledge EX is definitely a legit deck out of the set and will be a meta deck. It'll probably be a top 20 deck is kind of what I'm expecting. Top 20, like 10 through 20 is what I mean by that. I don't necessarily think it'll be a top 10 deck. I think it will be a card kind of like Goldengo EX as well that sees play with a variety of Pokemon. I think it's kind of like Goldengo EX, a bit less explosive, a bit more reliable in that manner, but also pretty like mediocre Pokemon, not bad by any means, but not going to be a top deck in the game unless something changes, but also it does have a lot of support with its evolution line being one of the most, I guess, diverse evolution lines. There are just so many Pokemon in the line. There's 2 different Pokemon that each both have multiple usable cards, so that's kind of cool, but ultimately the Ceruledge EX is a very solid card. There's Scovillain EX, which can do really solid damage if it's damaged, but that's kind of awkward. You could use Magma Basin. Keep in mind that will be rotating. There are a few cards that'll be rotating, but this Scovillain EX is a pretty, it's a pretty good card. Oh, Surging Sparks SSP. I was like, what is that? I thought that was like Scarlet something promo. I don't know. But anyway, it is an okay card. There's also Grass and Fire, so that's like kind of cool. But ultimately, this card doesn't really have the pieces it needs right now, and is also losing like all the pieces it has right now to rotation. This is Sylveon EX probably isn't gonna do much of anything, but it is a cool card that can theoretically hit like 1,000 damage as well, which is kind of funny. Gouging Fire can hit for 170 for 3. It's kind of like similar class to, I guess, the Paldean Taurus as well as the Ho-Oh as like these solid basic fire Pokemon that could have use cases, but ultimately probably won't as well. And we do have this Paldean Taurus, which can return 2 energies attached to your opponent's active stage 2 to their hand for 2 colorless. Double Turbo will be rotating, but I would not be shocked if we see some replacement for that card in some manner. So this is a usable control card. Then we do have Milotic EX, which is a great stall wall Pokemon, wall stall Pokemon. I guess just wall. It doesn't need to be within a stalled deck. But Sparkling Scales here says it's immune to damage and effects of attacks from your opponent's Terra Pokemon. Effects of attacks from Terra Pokemon, the biggest one would be Dragapult EX, but Feebas is not immune to that, and all the Feebases have 30 HP, which is not good, but whatever. You have a usable attack, very similar to Corstomass Ogerpon EX. Ultimately, as this Pokemon is an evolution versus other walls like Mimikyu, Corstomass Ogerpon EX, and those are the big 2. They're both basics, but you do have stuff like Norvern EX and for Giraffe. No, what's it? Giraffe, what is it? For Giraffe EX, yep, that's it. They are both evolution EXs that are, valid walls and standard, so Milotic EX will definitely see some play. Whalvian is an interesting Pokemon. Second attack, 170 for 2 is not bad, but Frigid Fangs for 1, you do 60. Your opponent, during your opponent's next turn, Pokemon that have 2 or less energy attached can't attack, and that's pretty annoying for some decks. Theoretically, you can auto-win certain matchups, or essentially auto-win certain matchups, but that's pretty unlikely. This is very annoying, though, and is something that you will be looking to use to shut down certain opponents. Theoretically, it's not a card that can beat everything, and it is a stage 2 single prizer, so probably won't really see play except as like a bit of like a meme deck, but it's an interesting card, and theoretically if we see some form of support, I don't really know what that would be, but some way to get this into play easier, not have to commit lots of card slots in your deck to it with the, at least two Sfeals and at least or was it Sfeals? At least two Sfeals and at least two Whalmans, as well as rare candies in your deck. You already need those, and the water energies, and you'd stuff some of the stuff you already have, but a lot of stuff you don't. So ultimately, probably not very good. Then we do have Black Kyurem EX, which can do Ice Age for 3 colorless, and it does 90. And your opponent's active Dragon Pokemon is paralyzed. This is pretty good of a counter to Dragon decks right now in the current standard format. 3 of the top decks in the metagame, Regidraco V-Star, Dragapult EX, and Raging Bolt EX, which I think are all top 5 decks in the metagame right now, are decks that are Dragon type, and so Black Kyurem EX is a viable counter to them. And they also have high HP and moderate switching. Dragapult EX doesn't really play switch. I guess it would play probably a Professor Turris scenario. Oh, yeah, stuff's not loading, is it? Probably playing a Professor Turris scenario. It does play Rescue Board, but that doesn't really count for this case. But then Region Bolt EX plays... Oh, yeah, no. Dragon Bolt EX doesn't play Prime Catcher. Region Bolt EX is going to be playing... Let's take a look at a list. It's definitely playing, yes, playing probably a 2-switch and a Prime Catcher. And then you look at Regidraco V-Star. I don't remember. I guess they play 1 switch and a Prime Catcher, but then they have the V-Star power as well. So that's not great. They do have switch outs. All the decks, or at least the 2 of the decks, the Ogerpon decks, do have switch outs. They're not all Dragon Pokemon, so it's not a counter that's like super good. It's a pretty mediocre counter. It's a counter that will help you a lot in those matchups, but you do need to be able to power it up, and it won't auto win you the matchup either. It's a card though that will end up seeing some play. Right now, it's seeing some play in Japan because of it being a counter, but it's been played in pretty defensive decks, as well as an optional attacker in Chimpanzee Excalibur, which just have some value, but not that much value. Then we do have the Quavel, which can use its ability to put the card from your hand on the bottom of your deck, then draw till 5. Ultimately, this isn't a super strong draw ability, but it's not super bad either. Quavel is a card that probably won't end up seeing much play, but does have some interesting things to go. It does have go with it. It has a single prize Quavel that is an energy accelerator, and also has it will, the rail will be rotating, right? So this could be what you're looking for, but probably not. There are also times when putting the card in the bottom of your deck is really bad, so it's not a bad card, but probably not good enough. This Titan's a card that I haven't really heard any talk about at all, and it's stage 1 with a 180 HP, which is really high, and also takes 30 less damage from attacks. You're talking about walls for stall-based decks. The Titan could be one. It has high retreat, a high attack cost for mediocre damage, so it's not a particularly good Pokemon to just really focus on to do damage and take knockouts, but it is a Pokemon which you can get value out of just putting it into the active position, and your opponent can't really knock it out and one-shot it, and if they do, it's only a single prizer, so it could be a cool Pokemon like that. You could almost see pairing it with like Dreadnought, where your opponent can't really deal with both. I'm not really sure if it does have a place in the metagame, but it is a bit of an interesting card to consider, and one that I think is considered, but that I would consider underrated at this point in time before the set, based on what people have said before the set's release. Iron Bundle is a bit of an interesting card. It's a future Pokemon and is water for 3 energy, 200, 50 less for each colorless in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. So this is a bit of an interesting attack here, allowing you to go ahead and do theoretically really high damage to certain Pokemon, especially if you do play Beach Court. You can be one-shotting, or at least doing massive chunks of damage to certain Pokemon, which is nice. Iron Bundle, or I was going to say not one-shotting, but if you do add the future buffs, such as Future Booster Energy Capsule, or then, of course, Iron Crown EX, you could get really good value out of this. Is this card good? It's probably not very good, but you could get value there. We do have the Chimpound. This card is a card that I don't think is seen play in Japan, which actually really shocked me. It's a card that allows you to just bump a stadium on play from hand, and that could be what you want. Stadiums in Standard are like good, I guess, as in they don't like hurt you really. So ultimately, you're not really super scared of any stadium. But I would be shocked if Chimpa never ends up seeing play, and is a card that I would definitely say, if you're looking at like what cards do I want to pick up that might end up increasing in value later on, this Chimpa would be one of those. It'd be pretty shocking or surprising if it never ends up seeing play. Pokemon hasn't really been prioritizing stadiums being really good, but I do believe that this card, that they will be good at some point when this is in standard, and Area Zero Underdepths is pretty solid, but there will probably be some that are really detrimental to certain decks, which Chimpa could counter. Then we have Pikachu EX, a pretty interesting Pokemon. It can do 300 for 3, and the 3 are 3 different types of energies, Grass, Lightning, Metal, when you discard them as well, but that could be useful, and there are ways to buff the damage, so it could be okay. I don't know. It's kind of sketchy, though. Like, how do you get the energy on? I'm not really sure. I guess you'd Electric Generator, Teal Upon EX, plus Energy Switch, plus attach to the metal, and that could be doable. Terma going second, which is pretty crazy, but ultimately probably not what you're looking to do either. I guess you play with the Arvin, you have Sparkling Crystal as well, but maybe there is something here, and it does have a pretty good ability. It has an actually insane ability, which says that if it would be one-shotted by damage, then it's not one-shotted and its HP becomes 10. There are some counters to this, but they're not really that common. So, I mean, there's like Dust Storm, which is like, I guess, a counter to it, but your opponent will be sacrificing Prize Guide, so at that point, I think you're okay with that. So, Pikachu EX's ability is nice. It will end up seeing play at the very least in the Miraidon EX deck as a Pokemon that just sits there. What? Lost Zone Manaphy? Anyway, yeah, so there's a Pokemon that'll sit on the bench in Miraidon decks, but it will be playable in other things as well, like Pikachu Regis. What? This seems insane. This actually seems really cool. I don't know what these decks are, just I'm clicking on stuff. This seems really, really fun. Anyways, so yeah, we have stuff like that. Then we have the new Magneton here, which can knock itself out, accelerate 3 basic energies from your discard to your lightning Pokemon any way you like. It does not need to be basic lightning energy, though. This is, again, another slot into Miraidon EX and lightning stuff in general. Miraidon EX, when I say that, I kind of mean just lightning. Enhance EX, Iron Thorns EX, Raichu V, and I don't know exactly what else, but it is a pretty good card, but does give up a knockout. It is not anywhere near the level of Dust Storm, but it is a pretty good card. I mean, theoretically, it could be insane with certain weird combos that like of cards that aren't in standard. And it could be used to power up Pikachu EX or Galvantula EX as well. Then we have Rotom, which can do some damage, but also the better attack here, your opponent reveals their hand, you discard all items and tool cards you find there. Could be really detrimental to certain hands from your opponent. It's a bit of a gamble, but it is a solid card. We do have Tapu Koko here, which can do 180 if you're down on prizes, kind of like some of the other big basics we've talked about already. Then we do see Miraidon EX, which after attacking is immune to, in fact, all your bench future Pokemon as well are going to be immune to attacks from Pokemon EXs. It's like a Mimikyu type card. It's okay and could end up seeing some play, but it probably isn't super good. We have Togekiss. This card's been talked about some. I think it's a not a very well designed card, but anyways, on a coin flip, you can take an extra prize. When you take a knockout, it doesn't stack, but it's a pretty good card with the heads. If you flip tails, then that is something that, it's not doing anything. It's a stage 2 sitting on your bench, not really contributing anything. It's a weird card. I think it's a lot like Dust Storm. I've talked about some in the past. Everything I've said in the past is what I'd say here, but it is a card that could be meaningful. And in terms of play, which play has it seen? I don't think it's seen that much yet. It hasn't seen much, but it is a card that is definitely one I'm a bit scared of. Then we have Azumarill, which if there's a Terra in play, it can attack for 1 Psychic, and this attack can be used for 1 Psychic. It does 230, so that's a good chunk of damage. So that's pretty solid. We have Spoochum, another baby, another Psychic, and it says, why are like so many of the baby Pokemon Psychic? Anyways, search your deck for up to 2 basic Psychic energy cards and attach them to one of your bench Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. This is okay, definitely something that could be useful, but not something that is probably very good in the current metagame, but it's a good card, theoretically. Then we have Latias EX, which gives all your basic Pokemon for your treat. That is a really, really good, definitely card that will see a bunch of play in basic focus decks that are all basics or mostly basics. We have AMU, Zelf, Mesprit, and Uxie. Uxie plays 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon, is a really solid spread attack. The best 1 energy spread attack in the game, or spread attack in this vein, in the game. There are some like it. There's the Yveltal, which has seen some play. There's Spinda, which is one of my favorites. And there's like a Reshiram. I think that rotated. That's not standard, but there's a good few like this. And this one's pretty good. It's probably the best. It's kind of like the same as the no, not the Mesprit, the Mismagius, which was in Astral Radiance. Yep, and then, no, what? Is that card in Standard? The Mesprit's in Standard, right? Oh, it was in Silver Tempest. That same attack here, it did have an ability that was nice, but this is a basic. Uxi's definitely a pretty solid card. Can be countered by Jirachi, though. It's not a super high-powered card either, but then you do have the other two in the combo, which I do think these are pretty cool together, and it could be played separately. Ultimately, the Mesprit, pretty simple for 2. If you have the other 2 on your bench, it does 160, which is, for 2 Psychic specifically, which is, it's okay, it's not insane, but it's solid. Then we have the Azelf, which is 10, and 10 more for each damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon. This, if you build up damage throughout the course of the game, can do massive amounts of damage. If you want to find more info about it, I made a video called... I don't remember what I called it. There's like a Giga Brain image on like the thumbnail or something like that. But anyways, I played a Ditto Box like Psychic deck. I played it a few times I think on the channel, but it's a really fun deck with like Mimikyu and Spinda and stuff. It plays like these 3, though not as powerfully, and it is a deck that can take it can like steal some wins. But these 3 I think are going to be a solid trio that could end up seeing him play as a, top 30 single prize deck, top 30 deck in the format, which is a single prize deck. And we have the Rodriguez, kind of similar vein to the Uxie. It says put 6 damage counters on each Pokemon to play that has an ability, both yours and your opponent's. Ultimately, like, very sketchy synergy with the Frostlass line, but could be what you're looking for to do massive amounts of damage to ability Pokemon. Then we have the Meowstic, or you could play it like not with them. I don't know exactly how you'd play this, but it's an interesting card nonetheless. Then we have Meowstic. If you discard an item card from your hand called Chilt, use your toy. It's not a very good item, but is mostly here for this ability. Then you gust one of your opponent's Pokemon, which is really nice. Ultimately, I think this Meowstic is going to see a bunch of play. I think it's a really good card, and it's definitely one that I'm excited to play with. I don't think it's broken, and it hasn't seen that much play in Japan, but it is a pretty cool card. What is it? Meowstic. And it's seen, it's not really seen much play in Japan, but I think it is going to be a good card. Then we have Sylveon EX. This has a mediocre attack with this first one, and its stellar attack is pretty expensive, as they all are, but you choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and shuffle those Pokemon and all cards attached into your opponent's deck. It could not be used back-to-back and cannot just win games because your opponent's going to have their active. But ultimately, this card's like kind of interesting and has seen some play in Japan. It's a bit of a cool card, but also one that I do think has limited upside with its first attack and really high downside with its second attack. We have Dedenne. This card, I think it's a really good card with electromagnetic sonar. Recover a trainer from your discard into your hand. This is the same attack as the Regieleki. Admittedly, the Regieleki is 130 HP plus certain HP buffs, and like penny loops could allow it to do some really powerful things. But still, this Dedenne, I think, is a really good card because it's Buddy Buddy Puff and searchable and has a great attack. This is a card that I expect to see some play in some decks. Not sure exactly what, could just be normal control stuff, but could be other things as well. We do have Palisand EX. This card's, like, in my opinion, pretty bad, but Barite Jail here, or Barite, that does for water, psychic, fighting. Put damage counters on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon until its remaining HP is 10. That seems like weird wording, but maybe I'm just tired or something. But anyways, this is like kind of interesting. We've seen things kind of like this. Theoretically, it's quite strong if you set it up. Obviously, it's kind of hard to set up, but you could get good value if you're able to set it up, and then can win through a few more attacks from there. This type of like can do 180 if your opponent's active is confused, so that's kind of cool. And DD on play heals 30 from your active and recovers from a special condition, which could be useful in certain situations, though it's not that good. Spathra devolves when your opponent's evolved Pokemon. This one's pretty bad, but it is a card, and I figured it's worth mentioning. This Gimmighoul is arguably the new best Gimmighoul, but whatever. That doesn't matter that much. Then we do a Flutter Mane here. Move all damage counters from one of your benched ancient Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon. This could be nice for ancient decks. And, Flutter Mane is definitely a card that might end up seeing some play. I said ancient decks, specifically the high HP EX decks. Annihilate can do 130 for 1 fighting and confuse itself, or knock out both actives for 2. That is pretty okay, but kind of sketchy there. Then we have Paleontaurus, which stops basics from attacking. You got this Donphan, which can take less damage next turn, 120 for 3, then takes 100 less if you discard 2 energies from it. We have Flygon EX, which has a hit and run attack here for 1 energy, and then it can also do 100 to each of your points, EX and Vs. Admittedly, this attack's pretty bad because it doesn't hit Terras on the bench, but it is an interesting attack here. We have Gastrodon, which is pretty good with the ability to Sticky Bind if it's on your bench. Bench stage 2 Pokemon have no abilities, doesn't turn off the active. There are ways to do it, notably Flutter Mane, but that isn't really going to be getting you anywhere, so not something you're probably looking to do. But could be what you want, just probably not. This does counter some pretty good stage 2s in standard. There are a good few, but ultimately, how good is this card? It's a pretty solid card and one that I will expect to see some amount of play, but I'm not exactly sure where you're putting it in. It does have 3 retreat, a pretty bad attack, so ultimately as attack it has its flaws. We do have this Passimian, which is like another mediocre big basic. We do have this like weird Glamora, and then we have Koraidon. This Koraidon is really good for 2 colors. You do 180 if one of your other ancient Pokemon use an attack during your last turn. That is a very solid chunk of damage for only colorless energy and hitting fighting weakness. This card really checks all the boxes, except it doesn't one-shot Squawkabilly EX, which is like not ideal because of resistance, but whatever, that's fine. You're one-shotting Fezandipiti EX and Lumineon V and a good chunk of Pokemon, or a few Pokemon, so it's a pretty solid Pokemon here. We do have Hydreigon EX, which is going to be allowing you to mill 3 and do 200, which is kind of good, or do 130 to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon. They're active, then 2 benched, but that attack is Psychic Darkness Metal Colorless, which is like super awkward. Then there's this like goofy Grafaiai, but probably not a very good card. Same thing, we got this weird little Dugtrio, which can do 120 for free if you don't, if you have exactly 3 cards in hand. That's not like super hard to get going, but also that's not very much damage. We also have a Registeel, which is a Regi, so you could put it in the Regis, but it's not that good. Then we have Duraludon. No, that doesn't matter. We have Arcaludon, though, which accelerates 2 metal to one of your metal Pokemon from your discard. This could be useful with Dialga V-Star, and of course useful with itself, which it just does 220 for 3 and has no weakness next turn, which is kind of cool. Lodengao is this like Pokemon. It has a hit and run attack that's kind of sketchy, and this on evolution attack, which is also kind of sketchy, but is an okay Pokemon and one that is cool. You have Iron Crown, which says can do 120. It's like another big basic that is metal and is future. And then we have Lonely Executor, which has this weird stellar attack, which is it's weird. But then you have your regular attack here, 150 for. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it is grass water. You do have 300 HP, but the big thing here would be copying this with Regidraco V-Star to add a few different layers of depth to the deck, and that could be useful. Then, because it offers a lot of energy acceleration, ultimately it's not that good, though. Then we do have this Altaria, again, could be put in Regidraco to give you some coin flip shenanigans where you are immune to stuff. Then we also have, let's see, Palkia is pretty bad in Draco V-Star. Turtonator can, discard energies, which is kind of good. The Eternatus is a card. Oh, the Flapple can go in Regidraco. Eternatus can do 90 for 1 to an EX, which is like kind of cool, but also not that meaningful. You can also do 230 for Darkness Fire, which is also pretty good. Reminds me of the Radiant Eternatus, which is a bit of an interesting card. Not a super good card, but an interesting one nonetheless. And then we have Tatsukiri, which also reminds me of Radiant Eternatus, which allows you to look at the top 10 cards of your deck, put any Pokemon you find there straight onto your bench, which is really wacky, but is something that you could theoretically do. It's really low HP and no like tankiness, but it's a funny card. We do have Eevee, which evolves instantly if it's in the active, which is like super good. This Eevee is like is really good. Then we also have Slacking EX, which does 280 for 2 colorless. It cannot attack if your opponent has no Pokemon EX or Vs in play, but most of the time they will. It has 340 HP. Ultimately, it's an okay Pokemon. It's not super good. I think I've underrated it a little in the past. It's not a completely worthwhile or worthless Pokemon. It's probably not that worthwhile either. It's okay. And does have pretty solid stats, which is very nice. I mean, it has very good stats. They're not super broken, but it's a card that you could play if you want to, and it can do some stuff with it. Unless you're against Ancient Box where you literally can't do anything. That's kind of bad. This is Kecleon, which is immune to damage on a coin flip, which is kind of insane. Its attack is pretty terrible. It's not good at all, but it's not really usable for any serious value. But it is a pretty strong ability. We have this Vivillon, which is like pretty underwhelming, but there is the other Vivillon in standard, so you could try to do something there. Then we also have Armarouge, which makes everyone's Pokemon weak to colorless, which is really weird. We got this weird Mousehole as well. We got Cycler's REX, which again is like not very good. Flamingo EX, same thing. And then this Trapkiss, which accelerates energy to Terra Pokemon in play, which is like kind of cool and definitely a card that you could play, but it's not that much better than Team Evolution. We do have Amulet of Hope, which allows you to search for 3 cards when you're knocked out as an ace spec, which is kind of interesting, but not like super insane. A card that you could get value out of, but one that I am not a big fan of personally because it can get Lost Vacuumed. I guess when Lost Vacuum rotates and only Jamming Tower is in the format as a counter, it could be solid. Then we got the berries as well. We got the Berry, which isn't great, and Pasho Berry and Colbur Berry, but they like reduce damage you take. The best one is going to be Colbur Berry, reducing damage from Darkness type Pokemon. We do have the Ace-Spec Brilliant Blender, searching your deck for 5 cards and discarding them. Where this is a standard format video. This probably isn't a very good card, but it's a card that could have value within some decks. Specifically, it's good within what's it called? I think it's called Perfect Mixer, translated in Limitless here. It's played in United Wings. I was like, what is the name of the deck? United Wings, the Ceruledge EX, this Gardevoir EX deck plays it, this Lugia V-Star deck plays it, and this Ancient Box deck plays it as well. So it could be played in a few different things. Tachikiri Dondozo as well. Some fun little combos here, but it's an okay spec, but it's not that good. With Call Bell, searching for a supporter as an item, but you can only play a turn 1 going second. It's kind of okay, but somewhat underwhelming. And then you have Chill Teaser Toy. This is the one I mentioned with the Meowstic. You're playing with that, but what it does is turn 1 going second, you can return energy from your opponent's Pokemon to their hand, which could be useful in certain situations, but that's not great. Lemon's Quick Wit will be healing Lightning Pokemon. You have Counting. Counting is super good if you're losing, aka down on prizes. Then all of a sudden, the Pokemon this card is attached to can attack for 1 colorless less. That is really strong and useful within certain Pokemon, though Pokemon like that are good right now, I don't think really work with this. I'm trying to think of like the best decks right now, and it could have value with Terrapagos EX. It could have value with some Lugia partners, but nothing super insane, specifically with Archeops. It's pretty good in Control. Could be good in Iron Thorns EX. And you can find value for this card in different decks, but it's kind of a weird card. Then we do have Cyrano, searching for 3 Pokemon EX, which could be good in terms of Pokemon EX with the raw draw power. You don't have anything super great yet. Squawkville EX and Mew EX and Fezdipt EX, which are very good cards, but ultimately not consistently drawing you cards like every single turn. And it's not like they're all. I guess most turns there'll be one of them getting value, but it's not a card that it's nice, but you aren't really looking to get 3 X's, to be honest. Deduction Kit, look at the top 3, put them back in any order, or shuffle them, put them on the bottom. Actually has pretty solid synergy with Teal Mesogropon EX, which is pretty interesting. Dragon Elixir heals 60 from your active dragon, which is like Clement's Quick Wit, but it's not a supporter, which is pretty insane. Then we have Drasna, which is this like weird shuffle draw supporter. And Jasmine's Gaze will reduce damage you take, but pretty situational. Drayton looks at the top 7, gets a Pokemon or trainer you find there, put him into your hand. Pretty solid, stuff going on here. Not like insane, but it's solid. Then we have Dusk Ball, which is like Great Ball, but from the bottom, you got Energy Search Pro, grabbing as many energies as you like of different types, which is not that good, but it is useful in Golden Go EX theoretically, so you can get some value there. Then we have Gravity Mountain, reducing HP of stage 2s by 30, which is really interesting. It opens up some pretty cool combos. I talked about this card a little bit, but it's really cool. And Lively Stadium, increasing basic HP by 30. Gravity Mountain, though, has seen play in so many decks in Japan, so many different decks in Japan specifically. Like we got all sorts of things here. So it's a really fun card and one of the coolest cards from the new set, in my opinion. It's really unique as well. Lisia's Appeal isn't a particularly good card. I've seen some people saying like this card's like super broken, which it's not. That like That's definitely just clickbait. But oh, wow, look at this card. There we go. It's seen some play in Japan, like some, because it's, I guess all these decks are like control decks or pseudo control decks. They're not all pseudo control, but they're mostly pseudo control. It's a card with some forms of value. It's boss's orders, but it gusts only basics, which is obviously a big issue because a lot of the Pokemon you want, or some of the Pokemon you want to be gusting, maybe a quarter of the time are evolutions, maybe more than that. I'm not sure. But then it confuses them. Ultimately, confusion isn't very good. It's not completely useless. I mean, it could be depending on coin flips, but it is something that could cause issues to your opponent, but not that commonly, especially most of the time you're playing a card like this. The confusion won't be getting much value. It's not a super good supporter because it's directly outclassed by boss's orders, and theoretically it is another boss's orders, but like how often you're looking for a fifth boss's orders when you already have Prime Catcher, Counter Catcher, Pokemon Catcher, and of course boss's orders itself, as well as Iron Bundle, and you could even play something like a Rhyme. Like there are so many cards that have unique value. Lucia's appeal doesn't, and ultimately will not be a particularly good card within the meta, most likely, unless, I mean, Boss Swords if that, like, rotates or something like that, which, when has its newest printing been? It's been, okay, it was Paldea Evolved, so it, like, I guess is going to rotate first, but probably not, probably won't be rotating, so Lucy's Appeal, probably not a very good supporter. Not, like, in a vacuum, I guess it's good, but in actual standard, it's not very good. Then we do have Meddling Memo, which says your opponent shuffles their hand, puts it on the bottom of their deck, draws a card, like draws a hand of the same size. This is like a weird card. I don't really know the use cases of it. I think it's called Obstruction Letter here. Just not really seeing that much play. Probably not going to be a very good card, unfortunately. Then we have Megaton Blower. Discard all Pokemon tool cards and special energy from all of your opponent's Pokemon. Discard a Stadium in play. This is like good against Lugia, and but I don't know. It's a weird ace spec. It's kind of strange. We have Mind's Miracle Headset, which says put up to 2 supporters from your discard into your hand. I've talked about this card a few times. Ultimately, the second supporter, it's not like that much better than recovering one, but recovering a supporter from your discard into your hand is nice value. So this is an ace spec that could be okay. Ultimately, probably not particularly good. I think in Japan it hasn't really seen any play. It's not completely terrible ace spec. Then we have Precious Trolley as well, which I'd say pretty similar things about. It gets as many basics as you want from your deck into play though. It is theoretically quite strong, but also looking at the decks it's played in, a big one is Charizard, and then also Dragapult, Iron Thorns. Apparently a lot of people are playing this deck. I have never heard of this deck before, but that's kind of interesting. And then you have, I guess I got to try this deck at some point. But anyways, you have a lot of these decks are just playing Buddy Buddy Poffin, and you're not really looking to fill up your bench turn one. I mean, it's not bad though. It's a pretty interesting ace spec and one that I think a lot of people are really excited for. I think it's okay. It's not super good, but it's not it's pretty solid. It's a pretty solid ace spec. It's better. It's probably better than Miracle Headset. Miracle Headset's kind of a fun one. Then you have Scramble Switch being reprinted. It's one of the original ace specs, and it says you switch. It's like a switch, and you can move energy from the old Pokemon to the new Pokemon, which is cool. It's mostly gimmicky, to be honest. Let's take a look. Scramble Switch has seen play in Japan in Dialga V-Star with Archaludon EX, which is sure something. So that is yeah, I don't really know what to say about that one. This definitely seems like a gimmicky deck, but Archaludon EX with Duraludon V-Star definitely seems, no, not Duraludon, with Dialga V-Star, kind of fun. Surfer is a switch supporter, then you draw till 5. It's a solid supporter, I think, that I expect to see some level of play. It's not a super strong supporter with super high upside, but is it's an okay supporter. Can do some things and can do some things you want to do. TM Flora is bad at that. Yeah. Terra Orb though searches for a Terra Pokemon, puts it into your hand. This is a solid item card. Ultimately, Terra Pokemon, there are no Terra Draw Pokemon, I don't think. So it's gonna have some serious downsides. Most of the decks playing it are only playing, one Terra Pokemon or one unique Terra Pokemon, so it's a card that just has like mediocre value so far. You look at this deck, it's just playing the Hydreigon EX, and most of them are just going to be playing the one. But it is a solid card that might end up being really good if we see good Terras in the future, and is an okay card for now. Then we have Time. Yeah, I'm not talking about the card. Oh, and then we have Rich Energy. Draw till you have 4, or no, draw 4 as a special energy attachment is kind of weird. Actually, no, or enriching energy. It's colorless. It's not very good, but it's like a bit of a funny card. You can like loop it. Someone just said you could like loop it with the Dunsparce, which is true. You're not attaching, you're like spending your energy attachment for drawing, which isn't great, but I guess I'll say time. You tell your opponent the name of a Pokemon in your hand, put it face down, then your opponent guesses that Pokemon's HP, then you reveal it. If they guessed right, then they draw 4. If they guessed wrong, you draw 4. Not the best supporter. It's a very bizarre one. It's pretty bad because draw 4 as a supporter would be okay. However, you do need a Pokemon in hand, so even if it's consistently draw 4, even if it's you choose you draw 4 or your opponent draws 4, but you need a Pokemon in hand, it's just probably it's pretty bad, right? So it's a pretty terrible supporter, but it's funny. There are some like kind of interesting things to consider, but not that interesting. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all the good stuff, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.